the people of, oh, thank you. In shul last Friday night, I said that we call ourselves the people of the book, but we also need to learn how to be the people of the heart and the ruach, because last week's parsha talked about lev and ruach and how we relate to lev and ruach. And so it feels like what happens sometimes is that people are involved in either the works of the head or the works of the heart. And what we're trying to do is merge those. So what's the point of studying Talmud? The point is to study. It's not to get to the end point, because there's no end point. It's just, you keep going. And when you're in Chavruta, with any different person you're studying with, you learn things. You learn things that you may not have known you even needed or wanted to learn. One of the reasons why I love a page of Talmud is that I feel like it is me. I have always thought that I had some sort of attention deficit disorder, which my doctors say I don't. That said, the rabbis certainly did. The rabbis start with a topic, not in the Mishnah, now we're talking about in the Talmud. They start with a topic and then they meander and they go wherever their head and their heart takes them. And there's something incredible about the conversations that can happen when we say, our goal is not to finish, our goal is to be in the text. So I'd like to start by saying a bracha together, a blessing together, by hearing a word from each of you about what you're looking forward to, and by also telling you what I plan for tonight and also next week. So the bracha that we say is in the chat. And again, this tune is from BJ in New York. So it goes like this. Please join with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord God, sovereign, who encourages us, commands us to want to learn Torah and to do Torah. Amen. So if we could, if you could just jump in and say your name and one word or two, not a PhD dissertation, one word or two about why you're interested in learning Talmud. And this class, by the way, was geared to beginners. So I know that there are people here who are not beginners, but we are going to gear it towards beginners. And hopefully we'll learn from the expertise of people who have studied a great deal as well. So if you could jump in, your name and something that you're interested in learning or why you're here. And I'm going to call on people so that we go quickly. Nancy Lewis is going, and then Evelyn Grossman, Evie Grossman. Nancy.
Nancy Lewis. I'm a beginner. I'm here to study Talmud.
Okay. And then Ellen Pristak after.
I'm Evie Grossman. I'm here because, Rabbi, you make it very easy for a super beginner to learn and to listen. I could never do this anywhere else. So you're giving me an opportunity that I haven't had before. And I say thank you. And that's why I'm here.
So it's Ellen and Emily, who I think is a friend of mine, who joined us.
I've done classes like this before, but my thought is there's always something else to learn.
Thank you to our excellent teacher who's taught so many of our children. Emily and then Tirza.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm driving home from dropping my son off, but I'm here to learn Talmud. I really know very, very little, and I'm excited to listen to Rabbi and learn from her.
And Emily's a friend of mine, not part of the community. She's in Pennsylvania, good friend. Tirza, then the Feinsteins. Stein, I don't know. Yeah.
Hi, I'm really delighted to be with everyone. I studied Talmud as a student in Prosdor many decades ago, and I'm just thrilled to have this learning opportunity with our rabbi and with the community.
Okay, Feinstein and then Melissa Pankov. Oh, you're on mute. And the reason, by the way, it's really good to,
Oh.
this is not a class where I'm teaching at you, although a lot of it will feel like it, but it's important that we know who each other are.
Well, we unmuted it, but the host put us on mute.
No, we hear you.
Because I got the
Cheryl.
music.
Cheryl Feinstein, and I'm here because I'm a very curious beginner.
Cool.
You
And
know,
Rich, yeah, good. Melissa, then Eleni.
Hi, I'm Melissa Pankov, and I'm here because I need to reconnect with my Judaism, and it's a nice diversion from work.
Nice. So Eleni and then Neil, and you're in different rooms, but probably the same house.
We're down the hall from each other. Yeah, my name's Eleni Litt, and I've studied Talmud off and on since I was 5 years old. But this sounds sort of like a joke, but it's not a joke. The more I study, the more I see what I have to learn, and my intention is always to bring a beginner's mind to the text, so that I meet it where it is and where I am in this moment. So I'm really, really happy to be here to study with all of you.
Awesome. So Neil, then Michael Golden.
I'm Neil Litt, and I tread water in the Sea of Talmud every day, and I'm very glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. Michael, then Ginger.
Yes. Okay. The exposure that I've had to Talmud is very limited, but when I have done some studying, I was absolutely fascinated how a group of rabbis actually came to some really good conclusions.
Awesome. Ginger, then Steve and Michelle.
Ginger's answer is to know and pass it on. Mickey is also taking the class off camera, and hers is to go beyond Torah because she reads.
I am so thrilled that a teen is here to teach us, because we will learn from the teens, and the youth shall lead us. So Michelle, Steve, then Harriet.
Okay. Talmud has always felt very murky to me, like I couldn't grasp the arguments. I mean, I've studied it at different times, but I just love the way you make things really fun and interesting, and that you understand like ways into something that's difficult, and share that with us.
Thank you.
First, Rabbi, I'm Stephen, not Steve.
Sorry.
And secondly, I'm going to use the Everest example because it's there.
Nice. Harriet, then Avi, then Avi. So Avi Paradise, and then Avi. I think it's Argaman. That's how I pronounce it in Hebrew. Anyway, Harriet, then Avi. Harriet Greenblatt, but you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Harriet Greenblatt. I don't know anything about Talmud, but I do have some familiarity with the phrase imitatio Dei. And I'm curious to find out how you or Talmud suggests that we can incorporate that into our lives, even at very low points of in very difficult times.
Thank you. Avi Paradise and Avi Argaman.
My name's Avi Paradise. I feel like I'm also a beginner. They say find yourself a friend and find yourself as many teachers as you can. So I'm glad to be here.
Yofi, Avi Argaman, and then Melissa.
I'm Avi Argaman. I'm a beginner. I've always heard a lot about Talmud, but didn't know that much about it. So I'm looking forward to learning more about it and finding out more about what it means. And
Nice. Well, go ahead.
And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to study more tonight.
I am too, to be with you. So Melissa, and then Dr. Mike Rosenthal.
Hi, Melissa Hager. I don't really know anything about Talmud, but what I do know is that I'm curious to see how the rabbis approach different issues.
Cool. Dr. Mike Rosenthal. I don't know if he can get to us now.
We might have to get back to him.
He might have to get back to us. So Andrew and then Rob.
Hi, Rabbi. I am just looking forward to continuing to learn from you and importantly from everybody else here.
Nachon. Good. Rob and then Susan.
I'm here because in the course of a day, I don't get enough time on Zoom.
Funny. Okay, Susan and then David Goldfarb. Susan, you're muted.
Yeah, I was trying to undo it. I was not doing it very well. I don't know anything about it and I really want to know. And that's basically it.
Great. David and then Linda Grenis and then Suzanne.
So I'm David Goldfarb. One of the nice things about going late in this process is that I can say that I have nothing to say that hasn't been said before.
Nice. Okay. Linda Grenis, then Suzanne.
Muting, I'm unmuting and I'm hi.
Hi.
I'm Linda Grenis. So most of my Jewish learning really has been as an adult. I don't know where I was in Hebrew school besides 7-Eleven. So I'm very drawn to learning as much as I can, and I especially like things that start with intro and beginner. And so I'm really excited to learn this.
Suzanne?
I'm Suzanne Esterman. I'd say I'm here for the food, but yeah, what everybody else said, I, like Linda, was at the JCC next door during Hebrew school. So I'm grateful to be able to do this now.
That's good. By the way, that's a great game to play. Where did you cut Hebrew school? It's a fun game. Where were you? And you should have been in class. It's a good game. I can tell you where I was. All right, we're going to begin. And for those of you who were not here at the previous intro to Mishnah, you're going to get an intro to Mishnah from everyone who was. So we write this document because we get kicked out of, yes. Thanks, Eleni. Yeah, we get kicked out of Israel, out of Jerusalem. And what happens when the temple gets destroyed? What else gets destroyed? Every aspect of Jewish life, how we organize ourselves. And so what happens, and a group of rabbis kind of get snuck out of Jerusalem, or at least those are the stories that we are recorded later in the Talmud, and they go to the north of Israel, to Yavne and to other places, the north of Israel, or then it was north of in Palestine, and they put together this thing called the Mishnah. And who's the editor? Jump in. So the editor is Rabbi Judah the Prince, or Yehuda HaNasi, and you can feel comfortable just jumping in if you want to answer Rabbi Judah the Prince, but it's not his words really. It's for the last maybe couple hundred years before him. And the people who write in the Mishnah, anyone remember what they're called? It begins with a T, and it's also the name of my dog.
Tanaim.
Tanaim.
A Tana is a rabbi from the time of the Mishnah, right? And the Tanaim write the Mishnah. So did you all get the text sheet that I sent around? We sent around? Okay, so I'm just going through now the top of the text sheet with the intention that I'll share the text sheet when we actually do the Talmud learning together. It's just to but I'm going through the terms now. So what's the Mishnah? Anyone want to give a good definition for other people of what Mishnah is? Throw some ideas out.
The written laws?
Yep, they were written laws. They are, the word we use about Mishnah is they're apodictic. They're just the laws. There's not a lot of stories. We showed you a little story, but they're getting the laws down in very direct, short sentences. Often the rabbis would memorize the Mishnah, or the Tanaim would memorize it. Okay, anyone want to add something else about when is the Mishnah closed? Around the year 200, we're done with Mishnah, and then we go to the next couple hundred years. And seriously, if you want to participate by throwing out some of the stuff that's great. It doesn't have to be just me. So what happens after the Mishnah is done? That's in Israel. Then the next piece is the rabbis talk for about maybe 300 years before they put together the next step. The next step is the Gemara, the conversations about the Mishnah. Where does that take place? Where do they take place?
Gonna guess Babylon?
Yep, some take place in Babylon, or the one, when we say Talmud, we're usually, because we're not that advanced. Anyone here studied Yerushalmi ever? The Jerusalem Talmud, Palestinian Talmud? Really much harder. A little bit different. Most people study the Babylonian Talmud. There's about 4 cities in Babylonia where it was written. The two most well-known are Sora and Pumbedita, which I know I've said before because I just like saying those words. They're a great town. I live in Pumbedita. So this is a text that is a commentary. Try to think about it as a discussion over generations. So Gemara is a discussion that starts from jumping off point of a Mishnah. And when you have the Mishnah and the Gemara together, that is called Talmud. If you studied 1 page of Talmud every day without fail, it would take you a little over 7 years to get through it. I think that there are many people who do this, and I think it's a hard endeavor because I think Talmud actually takes a longer amount of time to sort of let it come into you in a deep way. So 2 different words, sugya. What is the word sugya? I know that the people who study in Wednesday afternoons know the word sugya. You don't want to jump in? Or sugya?
Like a paragraph?
Yeah, a complete story, really. A story or a section. And then the next word that we're going to talk about is the word sota or sota, which, you know, we got to start with something, I don't know, you know, if I had to pick something else, I would have, except I like this particular piece of Talmud. But who wants to talk to us about what a sota is? Who is she?
She's a woman whose husband is jealous and suspects that she's been unfaithful.
Yes. Not a great piece of Torah for us, or at least from the modern eye. It's not so great to see that we have, I don't know, have you read the Salem witch trials? Yeah, so the Sota reminds me a little bit of the Salem witch trials because I think they're kind of based on the notion in the Torah that you can embarrass people in public and accuse them, and it's not a great part of our tradition. On the other hand, it is a great part of our tradition because it was actually a way out. It was a way out of jealousy, and it was a way of actually keeping couples together, we think. But what we also know is this may be in a part of the Talmud that's about a woman who is accused of having an affair, but that's actually not what we're going to study today, because what we know about the Talmud is it jumps around, which is why it's like the person who can't keep one thought. I look out the window and say, look, there's a bird, there's a tree. That's the Talmud. It goes from subject to subject. So we are going to be at the very end of a chapter, and I'm going to, in a minute, share my screen. But first, does anyone want to say anything, something unclear, or want to add to anything?
Well, I have a question and a comment. The question is, in what sense is the Jerusalem Talmud harder, more difficult? And the other one is, are you accusing the Gemara of having ADHD?
I am accusing the Gemara of having ADHD, yes. Well, I am accusing the Gemara of thinking like human beings do and not thinking in a very structured, organized way. In that way, I feel like that's how I think often. And if you're in an academic world, this is, by the way, Eleni, I was thinking about last week after your talk, I think there's an art to the way the Talmud was written in that it's not always linear and it's about conversation as opposed to a more academic approach. Well, I think. I also like, there's my favorite word in the Talmud is gufa. Anyone know what the word gufa means?
Body.
Well, yeah, so it means to go back to the original point. Like when you've gone around and around and around, and then you're like, wait, I'm reminding you, we're gufa, we're gonna go back to the original point. And I find like that's a lot of how our conversations are. And I also think it's about how we fight in the world, that you go, you don't know what you're fighting about, so you should go back to the beginning. Eleni.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting to think about why the Talmud's structured in the way it is. And I think one of the factors that contributes is really the mechanics of it. You know, they didn't have word processing, they didn't have editing. It was really expensive, the vellum that they were writing on, or the whatever they were using to write on. So you didn't write on something and then recycle it and throw it out. So I kind of push back a little bit on the ADHD. I think it's guys sitting around, and it was guys having conversations, kind of recording it afterwards. But they weren't going to throw out the materials. I don't know. That's just kind of one way of thinking about it.
So it's about conversation. It's in that it's different than a book today, right? It's not organized in that, like it would be, it's hard to write a table of contents for the Talmud, right? So maybe that's more of what I mean, that it's a flowing conversation that then gets recorded. I take it. I take what you're saying. Okay, we should get into it. And the way to get into it first is I just want to tell you who these guys are. As Eleni noted, they are all men. But that is not the case today. Today, lots of women study Talmud as well. So Rabbi Chama, these are just, you have it. So if you want to know when they lived, all the people, or most of the people that we're dealing with are going to be early on in the Talmud, right? Early, not so far on, not in the 400s or 500s. Then I wrote this thing. I wrote, what do these terms mean? Sometimes you need to translate the English to go back to the original for a better understanding. So I'm going to show you, now I'm going to screen share. Okay. Did y'all get this? Can y'all see it?
Can you drop the link in the chat also, please? Would that, if that's easy enough to do?
Yep, Suzanne.
Now.
I think Suzanne will do that.
Great, thank you.
We're going to go back to the questions that we're going to talk about in a little bit. I just wanted, for those of you who haven't seen a page of it, to see a page of Talmud. So here we are. And this is actually the page we're looking at. And I want to take you on a tour of the page before we get into the text. So can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay, so this reminds us of what chapter we're in. And this chapter is based on the word from the Mishnah that it's based on. And then right here is the chapter Perek Rishon, so the first chapter, and right here it says Sota. And then it says Yud Daled, so I know I'm on page 14. This is what a traditional page of Talmud looks like. So the text of the Talmud is here in the center. You have Rashi and Tosfot, which we're not going to deal with. We're not going to deal with them today. On the right and left, depending on which page of Talmud you're doing. And I'm going to show you. And then on the far left over here, these are more how to find different halacha in it. This is a different kind of additional text. So these are all notes. I'm going to go to the very bottom of this page. Something's really important at the bottom right here. It says the words Hadran Alayach, which means you finished the chapter, because those words mean we will come back to you. Hamakna li'ishto. We will come back to this chapter, and then you start a new chapter here. I wanted to show you where we're starting. We are starting right at this red dot that we were able to put in. And I'm going to read a line or so to you, but first, does anyone have any comments or questions? Comments, questions, things you think are interesting, not interesting? Okay, so I'm right here where the red dot is. In a regular Vilna Shas, that's what this is called. This kind of Shas is the word that we call. Yeah, who is it?
It's Richard. So the middle is a commentary on the Mishnah And the things on the side are commentaries on the commentary?
Exactly. So in the middle in here is the Gemara. I don't have a Mishnah on this page. It's a couple of pages back. This is one of the long conversations, and this is called Gemara.
Yeah, and that's commentary on the
Or
Mishnah.
Talmud, right? And I think it's larger than just commentary on the Mishnah. The Mishnah, it's a commentary on the Mishnah. It starts from the Mishnah and then goes on into its own stuff. And then on the right side, you have Rashi, and on the left side here, you have Tosfot, the different commentators, and then all around notes. This has actually been translated into Hebrew, because right now this is in Aramaic and Hebrew, and so it's translated into Hebrew with a little bit of help that you can certainly get online or from Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz. But I'm going to show you the English as well. I just wanted for the people who are Hebrew readers or speakers to see what the page looked like. So one of the things that you need when you're studying Talmud in the original is a book that tells you what all the abbreviations are, because there are abbreviations all over. Because as Eleni said, they're saving paper and they're speaking shorthand. We're going to start right here. Amar. I think you know what Amar means. No one needs to translate that for you. Anyone wants to jump in and say, it's like the modern Omer? What's Amar?
He said?
Yeah, Amar Rabbi Chama the Rabbi Chanina. So these, Rabbi Chama the Rabbi Chanina said, and here's this first phrase, and then we're going to go into the English. My dichtiv. What's different from the word my dichtiv and what you read above, Amar? Does it sound different to the Hebrew speakers? My dichtiv.
Is that Aramaic?
That is Aramaic. So we've switched from Hebrew into Aramaic. And the word my is a technical term. And when you actually, and we're going to learn for content today, but I want you to see that when you're actually learning it in the Hebrew, there are words that as you learn, whenever you see the word my, you know, oh, my dichtiv, what is the biblical understanding of this phrase? What's the understanding? What does this phrase from the Torah mean? And then you'll have usually half a phrase from the Torah. And then you'll figure out what the rabbis say about it. Okay, we good? All right, I am going to do something where I'm going to give you an intro, and then we are going to break up for about 10 minutes to read a piece of it together, then we'll come back. The intro, so the questions I'm going to do afterwards here are guide questions, but I think it's hard to jump in. And I get this. Does everyone have a copy of it? Or do you need it on the, yeah, okay, I'll leave it up. Okay, so I'm giving you where we're coming from. If I started at the top of page 14, I'm going to read to you what you're getting yourself into, because you're coming into the middle of a conversation, and the conversation we're entering in the middle is a conversation that will teach us what it means to walk in God's ways, according to the rabbis of the Talmud. So they say, show us where Moses is buried, right? Show us where Moses is buried. The men stood above. In the Hebrew, it's just going to say stood above. It appeared to them that it was below. So you see how everything bolded? Everything bolded is in the Hebrew text, and the other stuff you kind of have to assume. As these men stood below, it appeared to them to be above. They divided into two groups, one above and one below. So this is again the question of where's Moses buried? To those who were standing above, the grave appeared to them to be below. To those who were standing below, the grave appeared to them to be above. And then the rabbis write, this is to fulfill the statement in Deuteronomy, and no man shall know of his grave, of Moses's grave. There's a line in the Torah that says, no man shall know. Rabbi Chama, son of Rabbi Chanina, so he's going to come up again, says, even Moses, our teacher himself, does not know where he is buried. Okay, who finds that line odd besides me? What's it saying about Moshe?
Well, if Moshe is buried, how can he know where he's buried?
Yeah, there's something a little funky about it. Unless they do pre-planning, which I don't think they do. The idea is we're going to learn deeply from this that Moses, and no one knows where Moses is buried. By the way, why do you think nobody is supposed to know where Moses is buried? Someone who hasn't spoken. Just a thought question.
Oh, he wouldn't be revered as
Yeah.
a,
We don't want to make a deity out of him. It was private. Okay. Rabbi Chama, son of Rabbi Hanina, says, even Moses, our teacher, does not know where he is buried, or where, I guess, where he's going to be buried, aka no pre-planning there. And no man knows of his grave. As it is written, this is the blessing wherewith Moses, the person of God, blessed the children of Israel before his death. So they just put in the Talmud the first part of the verse. Why do you think they only put half a verse in the Talmud, usually all the time?
They're talking to people who know the whole verse.
Yeah, they're talking to people who know the whole verse. We're at a disadvantage because we have to go each time and look up the verse. Thank God, in most versions of the Talmud now, it tells you what the verse is. What it does mean, not when you're studying with me or with someone who's prepared the documents for you, but you really should have a Bible with you whenever you're studying Talmud. You really got to sometimes sit and stop and read the context, right? It slows you down, but it gives you the bigger picture. In other words, even Moses will not know the place of Moses's burial. Rabbi Chama, son of Rabbi Hanina, says, for what reason was Moses buried near Beit Peor? Okay, in order to atone for the incident that transpired at Beit Peor. You can look that up. We're not going to do it right now because we're going to go into the next part, which is, this is where your piece is starting. That was me. So what you're going to do, first we're going to read some questions, and then I'm going to ask you in groups. And I know Susanna is going to put a couple groups together where there's just a couple people in each group. If you are Hebrew readers in your group, you might want to read the Hebrew. I put it in with vowels. And if not, just go to the English. And again, just like Mishnah, read through. Take a toy. Read through. And then go back and see if you can figure out some answers to the questions. And we are going to take about 12 or 12 minutes in Chavruta, 15 minutes in Chavruta. I'm going to show you where. From the phrase, and Rabbi Chama, son of Rabbi Hanina, says, what is the meaning that which is written, after the Lord shall you walk? Do you see where it says CA right there? At the bottom of the section that I want you to look at, I put the rest of the verse. If you were reading it in the Talmud, you'd have to look it up. So it's not a big piece. It is down to there, down to this line. Here's the rest. I put in a different font the rest of the page. Don't go under the rest of the page. That's just if you get curious tonight or tomorrow. So it's really, I thought I numbered these pages. I guess I did. It's going to be from the line here, and Rabbi Chama, son of Rabbi Hanina, to the line here, and he was buried in the valley in the land of Moab. That's what we're going to be looking at with our partners. And these are the questions. First question is, what is the question they're trying to answer? So remember, just like when we're studying Mishnah, I think it's helpful to read through, but I would read through in the sections and the chunks the way I chunked it out. Okay, read through it, then look at the questions. What's the first question? Because right in the Talmud, they're always trying to answer a question. What is the question they're trying to answer? Okay. And what is unclear about this Torah text? You see there's going to be a Torah text. I already told you that. What's unclear about it? How do the rabbis try to answer themselves? Then we're going into the exact thing we're learning. What are the attributes of God that the Gemara is bringing? And if you get further down, what's the dispute between these two rabbis, Rav and Samuel? That should not, it should be Shmuel. So then for those of you who are a little bit more advanced, you can go to the very bottom. What does it mean when Rav Simlai uses the word drash, expounds, versus the very beginning, we have the quote, the question, my dichtiv. So what's the difference between the question, making a drash, a homily, or a dichtiv, the meaning of the text? So I'm gonna stop this for I want to see everyone. I'm gonna stop for 1 second. Does everyone understand what we're doing in a second? We're breaking up into groups. Just go to I'll share the text, but you're gonna probably have to share it yourself from the chat so that you can move it yourself. And you're gonna be in a group, and remember, some people might know a little, some people might know a lot. The first thing to do, read through the questions. The second thing to do, read through a chunk in English and then go back and try to see if you have some of the answers. And we will come back in about, do you feel comfortable being out for about 12 minutes? Yeah? We'll see how it goes. We'll check in with you in about 12 minutes. If you have a question, you can always ask us in the chat. We're gonna send you into your learning groups, into your chavrutas. Think about I titled this "To Walk in God's Ways." What's the Gemara trying to teach us? And again, what we can learn the most from is what the partner in your group thinks. So bye-bye, everyone. We'll see you in about 12 minutes.
Can you put the questions up on?
This is the first question, and we're starting where it says, show us where Moses is buried. Yeah. So the first.
Wait, what happened? How did I get here?
And
I don't know how I got here.
me either. Apparently the breakout rooms have closed when I didn't want them to.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good you saved me. Hi, Mike.
Hi,
How
How
you
are you,
doing?
Mike?
okay.
You can put your video back on, Mike, if you like,
Okay,
as long as you're decent. You gotta be decent this time, Mike.
maybe decent. What do you?
A little.
Ah,
That wasn't 12 minutes, was it?
Well, can we go back?
It was- We can go back. It was an abbreviated 12 minutes. I don't know what happened, but yes, so.
Does everyone want 10 more minutes and can we go till 8:15 or do you all have something at 8?
We were just getting started.
Yeah, we're just getting started. So give us at least 10 more minutes.
Okay, so give me, yep, I'll do the best I can. You'll have at least another 5 or 6, so, but probably not with the same people.
Oh,
Really?
Well, we left
then
off, you
forget
know.
it. With the
that's
same
too
people.
confusing.
Sorry,
Oh,
with the same
just
people.
bonded.
Sorry.
Yeah, we have to be with
Okay.
this, we have to figure
Do you
out.
want us to tell you?
Should we
What?
tell you?
Do we tell you who our groups are?
I think I have it.
Oh, good.
I think I do. So, okay, I'm opening the rooms again and hopefully it'll be for another 10 minutes.
Okay.
Linda, you better just come to the main room if you want.
That was fun.
Who's a Jew?
All right, who had fun?
We had fun.
Great. So let's see. One of the things I wanted people to sort of realize from this is when I showed you the piece of Talmud, this is on page 14, towards the end of a chapter, sort of stuffed in there. You wouldn't know where to start it. So if you're just reading Talmud day by day, then one day you happen upon a question that says, hey, how are we supposed to behave in the world? First you're talking about like, where's Moses buried and why is he buried? And then, oh my gosh, how are we supposed to live and behave? How are we supposed to live in this world and act like God? How do you do that? What answer was not there? Got to act like God. Someone in our group got that. What answer is not there?
To question God?
That's not there. What else isn't there?
Lighting the candles correctly.
Yeah, no one cares how you light the candles in this sugya, in this discussion. Or how much you learn, or how often you pray, or when you pray, or any of the minutiae. I guarantee you the rabbis do care about the minutiae. But when they take this verse that says, after the Lord you shall walk, and someone in our group brought out, cleave, you should cleave. It has the word dabek, yidbeku, you should like be like glue with God. How do you do that? So how do you do that?
That seems a little much to us.
So that's what's so spectacular. We jump in and go through line by line quickly. I know I don't have you forever. What are things that you learned that you want to talk about? And I might get kicked off and I'll get back in. Does anyone have anything they want to say about what they learned? Any of the group?
I think the best poetry in here is that the Torah begins with an act of kindness and ends with an act of kindness.
So we learn about kindness, and there's a beautiful poetic kind of way of looking at it, the beginning and the end. Nice. Anyone else want to talk about something that came up in your group? Bigadol, large?
We struggled with the part at the beginning where God was jealous and angry. And then immediately he tells us we're supposed to be just like God and be generous to those who are weak. But we just heard about God being a devouring fire. And that didn't turn out to be one of the attributes we're supposed to do.
That's right. We hear about that. Do as I do, do as I say, not as I do on this one. Or do as I do sometimes. All right, let's go back and actually go through the text briefly. Rabbi Chama, the Rabbi Hanina says, what do we learn about how Talmud is written there? We always quote each other. There's a line in the Talmud that says, if you want to bring Geula, redemption, you say it B'Shem Omro, in the name of the person who said it. So I believe at one of my really good friends in college went to Princeton as an undergrad. I don't know if they still have this now, but I remember she had to sign all of her papers that it was completely her work and not an act of plagiarism. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. At JTS, by the way, they assumed that. But it's in Jewish text, it's not meaningful if you can't tell what rabbi said it. We always teach in the name of the rabbi who said it. So Rabbi Chama and son of Rabbi Hanina says, what is the meaning? And after the Lord you shall walk. What else should you do? What does the rest of that verse say? You shall fear God, have yirah, not really fear, love at the same time. You shall follow God's commandments and hearken to God's voice. You shall serve and you shall cleave to God. So in the middle of this discussion about what to call, about how to act in the world, about how to bury Moses or where Moses is buried, it's the conversation of, wait, how do you act in the world? And the rabbis ask a question back to Rabbi Chama, Rabbi Hanina. the verse, they say, but how do you do it? You know, we often say, oh, you should be godly. And here the Talmud is getting really concrete and telling you how, telling us how. Okay, so that verse, I think, why do you think that verse is there?
Which
Verse
verse?
that says, for the Lord your God is a devouring fire, a jealous God. So it's a reminder that we're not going to get so close. We're going to try, but we're not going to get so close. Okay.
I think it's also referenced back to Moshe, because remember Moshe has to hide himself in the rock and only sees God's back. So it's we're playing with Moshe back and forth here.
Yes, and we're also playing with how we already know that God's a jealous God. So we can't not know that, and the Talmud can't not know that. You had an interesting idea in your group, right? That maybe this is sort of a challenge to what you're going to hear next. Okay, so what do we hear next? What are the 3 things that one can do to actually follow in God's ways?
Clothe the naked.
Yep. Malbish Arumim is how we call it in the blessings in the morning. Malbish Arumim, clothe the naked. What else?
Visit the sick.
How do you say that in Hebrew? You all know, many of you know.
Hachnasad orchim.
Bikor cholim.
Bikor cholim.
Bikor cholim.
Right.
And the last one is
Console the mourner.
Nichum avelim. What do they have in common?
They're all acts of kindness.
They're also all in relationship.
Talk more about that. They are acts of kindness. And then what do you mean, Eleni?
They involve other people.
Yep.
You're not just doing for yourself, you're connecting with others in community.
And they're all vulnerable.
Yeah, they're all vulnerable. And they're all, I mean, this is one of the pieces that I think of so much, that often we think about doing acts of chesed, right? Let's take care of the poor. But what I think this piece of Talmud reminds us is that there are times when we are all poor, meaning when you are sick, you are vulnerable.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
When you have lost someone, you are vulnerable. And you at one point in your life need to be clothed, but I would say for many people at 2 points in their life. When you're a baby, and how many of you have helped elderly parents or grandparents?
Mm-hmm.
This is about the human condition. If you want to walk in God's ways, you follow and help those, not those who are poor, those who are human. Those who are human. Polly.
I'm a little surprised that one of these things is not feeding the hungry, especially since this is a Jewish document.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I don't know why that is, but there's a great deal of ink spilled on the Talmud that talks about how much food to give people. And I'll reference what you learned 2 weeks ago, right? How much do you as a Jew, each one of us on this Zoom, how much do each one of us need to provide for someone at Pesach for Seder?
A lot.
How much?
4 cups of wine.
Yeah, 4 cups of wine, not 1 cup of wine, and not 1 cup of grape juice, 1 cup of actual wine, right? Now, and there is a word to say in the Aramaic, grape juice. So that's not what they say. You need 4 cups of wine, meaning, yes, Polly, it is odd to me, certainly someone who I've worked with like food insecurity. But, oh wait, what did Linda say? I didn't see that. I'm not under, Linda, what does that mean? Oh, but you're on Zoom. You're on mute.
It's not related to this. It was about some Hebrew words, but not related.
So
Okay,
sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So, okay,
No,
we have, you're right, Polly, it is odd that another kind of chesed of providing food is not here. I'm not sure why. I don't know. But these are pretty good examples of things we must do to care for others. Tell me about the literature of how the Talmud works here. What do you notice about how the Talmud speaks? For those of you studying, I'd love for someone who's studied for the first or second time tonight. This paragraph.
So your proof texts are from the Torah.
You got it. The proof texts are all from the Torah. The Talmud speaks in verses. It doesn't necessarily here, or many places, have its own idea, but the greatest way that you can prove something in the Talmud is
Quote the Torah. Or quote the
Torah.
other.
If you, a lesser good way is to quote a Mishnah. And an even lesser good way is to quote what we call a Braita, something written at the time of the Mishnah, but that's not included in the Mishnah. And an even lesser good proof text is another rabbi in the Talmud. But here they hit the jackpot. We call it the dictionary that people use when studying Talmud in the Aramaic is written by a rabbi whose last name was Jastrow. You know of the Jastrow dictionary. You can look it up online, Jastrow dictionary. And we call this a Jastrow jackpot. When you look up the phrase in the Talmud and you get the exact Hebrew verses, that is in your Talmud thing, your Talmud sugya. Here, it's a great piece of Talmud because it doesn't have to quote other Talmud or Mishnah. Who's it quoting? Just Torah, which means it doesn't argue with itself. It's not going to argue with itself until a little bit later. Let's go to the next couple verses. I know I only have you for another minute. The Gemara discusses the verse, and the Lord made for Adam and his wife garments of skin and clothed them. And then they have a discussion about what kind of skin. What do you think this discussion's about?
We were talking, is it the skin of an animal or anything? Skin doesn't necessarily have to be from an animal. We're saying skin can be on a fruit. It could, I keep thinking about the fig leaves, that the garments were fig leaves. I just couldn't imagine, it being the skin of an animal.
When I read it, I agree with you that could be, but when I'm reading the Hebrew, I'll read the Hebrew to you. Chad amar davar haba min haor. One says, chad, there that's echad, but in Aramaic, it comes from the skin. V'chad amar, the other says, davar sha'or nehaneh, that the other says something that the skin benefits from. I'm thinking of like date oil. Or
yeah, that's what we were thinking.
Or something that maybe the clothing isn't the clothing, but it's something that you're putting on the clothing, on the skin itself. That's the question they're asking. Interesting.
Wow. Well, we got into this idea that maybe God just threw something, but it didn't really feel good. So and it reminded some of us about, in situations of food insecurity where people give the food they don't want to somebody else. And then the food they give them is really like maybe not tastier. So we were kind of fumbling around in the rabbinic dark with that one about what it really meant, because it seemed obvious to some of us, and then it got to be an interesting question for others.
I think it is the interesting question of what actually was the chesed and how was it done. And I think I may have told you before that in my former food pantry, Neil, I see you, I'll get you next. I would have a contest every Yom Kippur, because we would get all of the donations from all the area synagogues, and then we'd have people come in and sort, and I would give a prize to the person who found the most out of date.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. There's always something out of date. But then how many of you were at our Poland lecture on Sunday? So I was with Rabbi Shudrick, and we were at a little store buying tam-tams, because a lot of the kids got sick from the kosher restaurant, and they can't even say this with a straight face. They were out of date in 1974. we were there in 92.
Wow.
Yeah, something, that's what they got. Yeah. So it is an interesting question that, but I think that verse always, I like this piece of Talmud, this particular piece, because Rav and Shmuel are disagreeing what it might mean for God to have clothed, and that maybe it was good, maybe it was bad, maybe it wasn't enough. Okay, we're gonna go to the last piece. Rav Samlai taught, Simlai actually, with regard to the Torah, its beginning is an act of kindness. So I'm gonna read it in Hebrew. Darash Rabbi Simlai, Torah Tchilata Gimilut Chasadim, V'sota Gimilut Chasadim. Beautiful line. The beginning is Gimilut Chasadim, acts of loving kindness. The end is acts of loving kindness. The Lord God made for Adam and his wife garments of skin, and its end is that he was buried in the valley of Moab. So now you see how the Talmud works, because now, a half a page later, we are back to where the question of where is Moshe buried? And within this discussion of where is Moses buried, we have a beautiful gem of how do you behave in the world? What does the Talmud say about how you behave in the world? Who do you take care of?
Vulnerable.
Vulnerable, and every Jew, every person, not every person will be poor, but every person will be sick at some point, and every person will suffer a loss at some point. Avi Paradise, jump in.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that quote about how it begins and how that idea that it's really about the relations between people. Clearly, that's what they're interested in. But the Torah doesn't begin with Adam and Eve. The Torah begins with God creating the world. So you might, if you were an environmental rabbi, you'd want to say that, and you'd want to say that there's something about caring for the earth or some kind of bigger thing. And clearly, the idea that they're jumping and starting with Adam and Eve and focusing on humans is interesting and significant.
Well, it's for its time and its day and its period. We are certainly anthropocentric. By the way, the next week we're going to talk about anthropomorphism in the Talmud. Anthropomorphism, how God somehow has a face some days and an arm and a hand, but we think God, according to Maimonides, doesn't have any form. Yeah, Avi, certainly the Talmud does talk about how we care for the earth, just not here. And something that someone in my group picked up, it's not the beginning here, and it's not the end of the Torah. There's 6 more verses in the Torah after that last verse. So it's not the very beginning, not the very end. So here's my summary. What's great about the Talmud is that you guys get to discuss it with each other. What's great about the Talmud is that you happen upon a conversation about where Moses is buried, and then it leads to a conversation about how do you walk in God's ways? And then it goes on from there. Does anyone have anything they want to add or subtract? I put the end of this chapter in if you want to keep reading it, but next week we're going to jump in and read a whole different section and read about, hold on, I'll tell you where it's from. Hold on. I kind of picked some greatest hits for this class, or things that I think are sugyot that are great hits. Would anyone like the text before to be able to read it a couple days before?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, that would help.
Okay, so we are going to go to Masechet Yoma, which is about the day of Yom Kippur, but we're going to talk about anthropomorphism and truth. So does anyone have any good, bad, or indifferent that they want to say? And I will be at the synagogue, so the dog can't bark. Who would like to say positive, negatives?
I
I
made a comment to our group that when I was studying Shakespeare at Columbia many years ago, the idea that the Hebrew God was a jealous God was like kind of taken out of context, I thought, and juxtaposed against the New Testament God, who was seen as kind and generous, when in fact, what that does is it ignores the complexity, the different attributes of God that are contained in the Torah.
But I think it's such an interesting thing that you bring up, Tirza, because I think that is actually this a prototype for a trope of anti-Semitism. that has been used as a trope of anti-Semitism because, look, what they call the Old Testament, we call the Only Testament, does show God as an angry figure.
9 p.m.
Right, and a jealous figure. And look, we get beyond the flood, but the flood is a disastrous story. And a painful, disastrous, terrible story. So we Jews do have an issue with how God behaves at the beginning. I said to my group, God grows up in the Torah. You see God behaving differently, certainly in our latest text. So the latest text of the Torah is Deuteronomy. And God behaves a little bit differently than a petulant child saying, if you don't do good, I'm going to throw a flood and kill all of you. Start again.
And not to compare, I'm hardly a scholar of the other testament, but as I recall, I mean, I've read pieces of the New Testament where that God doesn't sound like always so kind and forgiving. I mean, there are things that Christians have to do also to be redeemed. So it has that same feel to me as one could find in our Torah.
We were actually, I'm not so well versed in, I mean, I've read it obviously many times, but I'm not well versed enough to know that, yes or no. We were talking about the Christian under overtones, both of one of the verses that was used in this particular, the text, when you read on a little bit, there's a verse. Okay, who has anything, thank you so much. Who has anything else to add or detract, or they liked or they didn't like?
I really enjoyed studying with my fellow congregants, meeting a couple of new people and looking at a text and, you know, got different perspectives about the text that had not occurred to me. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I did
That's
too.
great. And I hope that maybe in a couple of years, there'll be a piece of artwork from it. I'm joking.
We had started having an interesting discussion on the phrase, you shall fear your God. What does fearing God mean to you? So our breakout room finished, but that could have gone on for, you know, another couple of hours.
And days and weeks and months. And let me say that we are at a little bit of a disadvantage to have read the English, in that the Hebrew is yirah, which really shouldn't be fear. I believe that yirah, and you've heard the term yirat shamayim, fear of heaven. I don't think it's fear. Our teachers didn't think it was fear. It was more awe. I don't know why it's not usually translated that way, but it's an awe, fear. It's awe and fear mixed together. Yes, you could have.
I had made the point that when I was, you know, quite young, single digits, if I had done something wrong, and I knew I had done something wrong, when my parents found out about it, what I feared was that I had disappointed them, that I let them down, rather than I would have rather had a punishment rather than look at their faces that I let them down. So that's how I was interpreting, you shall fear your God. Fear that you're letting down someone that has taught you how to do it, and you let that God down.
That works for me. Anyone else?
Often where you see fear, ira, you also see ahava, love. And we didn't see that pairing here.
Yeah, correct.
Except for that we were supposed to fear God, and then we were supposed to do acts of love and kindness, in effect, to people that were vulnerable.
And we saw, though, that God did do those acts of loving kindness.
Right. Good point.
Even though, you know, the rabbis, what we call the stam of the Gemara, the voice, the voice that doesn't have a name, the stam, the speaker, is saying, wait, you know, there were issues with God at times too, which actually makes me feel better. Meaning I can try to help people that are vulnerable, but every once in a while when I mess up or I'm angry, that's godly too. I mean, I gotta say, you know, sometimes you get frustrated in the world. Like me, I'm frustrated with this dog right now. Suzanne, you had a...
Yeah, I have a question. So Rabbi, I understand that you say that there are differences in the the Hebrew and the translation. And there are those of us, as you know, I'm one, and I'm may not be alone that I read Hebrew like a 4-year-old and understand it in basically those terms. How would you recommend that perhaps there's more than just me on the call, or just for me here, how I would
Study,
proceed?
study in a class.
I'm sorry?
Study in a class. That's what you have us for.
Okay.
Study in a
But is there anything that we should look out for, or tips, let's say?
I should have better translated that instead of using a translation. So that's my fault, and I will work on that. And then I think that it's really, you know, I'm torn between using a text that has none of the stuff that's not in bold, the helping words, but I do think that I like using the text that has the non-bold so that we get explained it a little, it gets explained a little more. I think this is the only term that I feel a little uncomfortable with. But I think that other people might feel comfortable with fear. I just don't.
Thank you.
Okay. I think I don't want to keep you past 8:30, even though I would stay and study with you for hours and days and days and days. So if you are interested in this and you liked it, come next week. And if you have to do it on the Zoom, that's fine. If you have comments that you want things for me to change, hopefully I will get this to you by Friday even. And thank you. And
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi.
Tis kula mitzvot, that we should all be able to fill our lives with mitzvot. And we'll fill our lives with mitzvot, but also remember that to walk in God's ways, at least according to the Talmud, is to take care of each other at our times of vulnerability. I will see you. I hope I'll see you. If you're male, I don't know why it's only men, but I'm doing Torah on Tap tomorrow night. And
it's not only men. They did widen it. So please come.
Come to Torah on Tap. We're going to learn some Torah, and we're going to learn about tap, not dancing, drinking. And then Thursday night, we have an incredible program with one of our congregants, Ben Strauss, who is the head climate scientist for Climate Central, right? And upcoming parent of a bar mitzvah. So come and learn. It's part 2 to our first series part where we were learning Jewish texts with Diana, with Rabbi Jenny Rosen, and then come all weekend and then do something even more crazy. Come to shul when there's no cantor visit the weekend after and be with us. And thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. See you next week and before.
Thank you. Yep.
And I'll stay
Tomorrow.
on to
See you all tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
We're on Tap. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
And it won't be just Linda and me drinking.
You can get yourself a Corona beer.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. I'll see you later.
Bye, Rabbi. Scratch Tani for me.